Hey there, I'm Zephyr, a Zephyr main, and I've been seeing a lot of confusion online concerning her tornadoes. I wanted to make a video explaining some of the jankier mechanics, how to abuse them, and a little bit about how I play and what I use. This video will be skipping over most of the basics of Zephyr, since it's aimed at people trying to maximize the potential of this frame, or trying to understand the deeper mechanics at play. So if you're looking for an overview of Zephyr, I really recommend this guide by Sajin Khan. Regardless, if you're interested at all by this intro, watching an 8-year-old weapon evaporate mobs well above steel path level, stick around, I've got some cool stuff to show you. Sounds good? Alrighty, let's get into it. So, Tornadoes. Zephyr's fourth ability summons 3 tornadoes, which you can tap cast to have randomly roam around the map, or hold cast to put them in one place together. Reading from the Wiki, Zephyr and her allies can attack each tornado to distribute 100% of total damage, including critical hits and status effects, from weapons and abilities to all enemies trapped within a tornado. First of all, it's important to note that forced status procs will not apply, such as those from melee stances or forced impact procs from Arca-Plasmor-like weapons. Also, condition overload effects do not add additional damage to shots fired into your tornadoes. So if your weapon relies on gun CO to deal good damage, shoot into the mobs themselves and not the tornadoes. Critical damage dealt to enemies trapped within a tornado is multiplied by 200%. This has nothing to do with the actual weapon's critical damage stat, but really is just a binary yes-no. If it's a crit, then double damage, if not, don't. The bonus doesn't care what tier of crit it is, the bonus is always 2 times. Each tornado is invulnerable to damage. This is just objectively wrong. Tornadoes each have 500,000 object health, meaning that they don't take crits or status effects, so they are somewhat hard to destroy, but when they are destroyed, they will no longer distribute damage to enemies contained within. A really easy way to display this is with the Tenet Plinks, which will consistently break tornadoes with a single use of its alt fire. There's a lot of other interesting things about Tornado 2, but I just wanted to cover some of the things that were flat out wrong in the wiki, or had caveats that were really important, but you would have missed them on the first try reading it. And we're just going to skip some of the other things for the sake of time and really dive into the weirder stuff, which means we're going to see a lot of simulacrum footage, so I'm sorry in advance. Speaking of, let's talk about Crit Inherit. Crit Inherit refers to a phenomenon that you might have noticed before on weapons like the Nataruk, where the crit chance of the weapon when fired at enemies does not match the crit chance when fired at tornadoes. If you fire a perfect shot at the enemies normally, you'll get red crits and orange crits, rewarding you for your efforts. However, if you pop them in tornadoes and try to do the same thing, it's all yellow. Why is that happening? Of course, if you shoot at the enemies themselves, that doesn't happen, but shooting at the tornadoes procs much lower tier of crit. Why this happens is because when Tornado looks at the crit chance and crit damage of your weapon, it ignores everything down below here. It just says, oh, cool, the very first crit chance stat here, let's just use that. It doesn't really include or consider even the 180% crit chance with a perfect shot. It just looks at this one and runs calculations. It does use the base damage of the perfect shot, so it is still higher, but it is a little wonky in that way. This also happens with Incarnon weapons, such as the Miter here. The Miter, as you can see, has 132% crit chance on the quick shot, so with the Zephyr bonus, passive bonus, we're probably going to get oranges, but in its Incarnon form, it's 206%, which will easily pass 100% red crits with Zephyr's passive. And yeah, so if we see this, we should see, if we fully charge Incarnon mode and fire it into a crowd, it'll deal all red crits, but if we fire it into tornadoes, it's going to be orange crits. So, yeah. Let's just summon in our mobs again to show that off. So, all oranges and a little bit of yellow, but if we fire into the mobs themselves, all red. But yeah, for weapons like Incarnon weapons, you probably just want to ragdoll them with airburst, because tornadoes don't really do a lot for them. But this Crit Inherit works multiple ways as well, because there are weapons in which the crit chance of the very first stat is substantially higher than the crit chance of the second stat. For example, the Quanta Vandal. Quanta Vandal, as you can see, has a much higher crit chance on its primary fire, this beam weapon, and then a much lower crit chance on its secondary fire. Secondary fire is generally quite useless, because the crit is low, the status is worse than the primary, and the damage is fine, but not incredible. However, it can do some funky stuff when used against weapons, or against enemies, as long as you have Crit Inherit in mind. So let's try that out. secondary fire, boop, and then look at that. They're all dead. Amazing. Obviously, this is a little muted by the fact that you could also do the same thing by firing once into that, but that's another bug that we'll talk about in just a moment. Another weapon with an interesting crit inherit-like effect is the Trumna, which you probably have heard of before, having issues where, or not issues, but a bug where it would automatically recharge itself on alt-fire, recharging its alt-fire so you could infinitely bomb. That has been unfortunately patched, however, not fully, and I'll show that off here. So, if we summon in our mobs again, as always, grab some more energy, because they don't have my Sentinel to providing energy. We just do this, charge it up. They'll just quickly die for the slash procs and the gas. You can see here, if I fire my alt fire into it, they will not charge it back up. It'll just not do anything, which is fixed behavior. However, if I quickly charge it up with this group, and summon in a new group of mobs to kill, I'll show you something interesting that does work. That is, if you summon more mobs in, so firing into the crowd won't work to charge it up. However, if the game forgets that the alt fire is the thing that kills, say it ricochets, then it will fill it up. Which means that if you can pull off multiple ricochet chains, you can kill mobs and always use alt fire again, just like the old Trumna was able to do. So another interesting side effect of Crit Inherit working its weird, bizarre magic. Alright, and this brings us to our weirdest and most powerful bug, Crit Recursion. For this, I'm going to show off using my Quanta Vandal. Again, this is what I used in the intro clip. And as you can see, I'm not going to be using this build yet. I'm going to be using this much weaker build, because this is really all you need to kill these mobs. It's going to take a little while, but it will do very well considering that it is an unreactored, unformed weapon from 8 years ago against Steel Path mobs many times higher level than you would normally encounter. Anyways, let's spawn these guys in. Grab some more energy. So what's basically happening here is a weapon that procs a lot of electricity, which the Quanta Vandal does in spades. The electricity procs off, redirects into the tornadoes have them, crit them, add them back in, add a slash proc, and then repeat that process over and over again, scaling exponentially until everything inside is dead. As you can see, that took very little time. Hey there, Editing Kyo here. I forgot to point out that this bug only will work if you are the server host or the mission host. This will only really work consistently if you are running solo, or if you have a group of friends and you know that you are the one hosting every time. It can also work in public, but you need to be this host, you know, the one with the 1 next to their name. Otherwise, it will perform just like normal. The tornadoes will not crit the status effect back. So, kind of a big caveat, and something I forgot to mention, but it is super important. So, yeah, keep that in mind. This is really best suited for solo play or solo endless missions. It will not work if you're just using this in public missions, but also, to be fair, if you're running public missions, you're kind of going to be stopping everything anyways, and then you won't last very long in an endless mission because somebody's going to extract. So, yeah, something just good to keep in mind. There is kind of a critical mass that needs to be hit. Some amount of enemies or some amount of electric procs to kind of crit over and over, and obviously you also need 100% crit chance for this to work. But this weapon, as you can see, is melting these enemies, despite being almost unmodded, and these enemies being very, very tanky. So let's show off with the actual good version, and just see how drastic the difference is, because with actual good crit chance, this scales even harder and even faster. So summon in our mobs, and I'll just fire once. One shot, and it'll just kind of scale and repeat, and then everything dies. One shot again. Everything dies even faster because my stacks are built up. And if you want to really kill things fast, you hold it down for maybe a second. And then everything dies. Interestingly, too, this does scale with the amount of enemies within the tornadoes, obviously. However, if you're stuck with an enemy that only is on its own, for example, something like a Demolist, you can actually load it up with electricity procs, a bunch of them beforehand, and then use this mechanic to deal with them without it being able to dispel your tornadoes beforehand. So here, loaded up with about 500 electric procs, cast tornadoes, and it's dead. So that basically, again, the damage was built up on the mob, it bounced into tornadoes, tornadoes said, okay, we'll take that, redirect it back in, applying tornadoes crit damage bonus. And it gets very disgusting. This also obviously will work on armor targets as well, because it also applies a bleed proc. I just don't have any Grinning or Demolist scanned because I don't run any disruption. It's not a game mode I like to play. But if you like disruption, this is a pretty neat way to deal with it. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer, I don't really know why, but it generally will always kill them in one shot as long as you load them up with a little bit. And yeah, this also lets you do the very funny thing of killing a ton of Demolists extremely quickly if you ever wanted to do that. So he does kind of apply a bunch of procs to one of them. Tornadoes to all, and then they all die. So, yeah, neat stuff. And that's Crit Inherit and Crit Recursion to the best of my knowledge. If I miss anything, I'll be sure to include it in a pinned comment below, but I'm now going to dive into the stuff I like to use for Zephyr, and kind of the reasons why I like to use it. If you want to stick around, here you can check this out. So to begin with, I've got Archon Shards in here. I've got 100% casting speed. This is what I found to feel really, really good. Everything else is just in duration, just because you can always have more duration with Zephyr, just makes uptime a little easier. The only thing I'd really say is necessary is at least 50% casting speed, so just 2 Amber Archon Shards. Anything beyond that is just an extra nice bonus. And obviously I'm running 100% because I have the shards for it. Going into the build, the first one I've got here is my main Zephyr build. This is the one which I use for 90% of all content. It's just kind of a simple mobility build with very generic survivability mods and equilibrium for energy and streamline for a little bit of energy efficiency. Notably, I don't run any of the fancy or expensive arcanes. Both of these are quite cheap. This one was like 10 platinum, and this one you can farm super easily for just a little bit of time in the Zeramin. I also don't have any subsumes on here too. This is just basically pure vanilla Zephyr, which I think is great because pure vanilla Zephyr is very fun. Beyond that, I've got Owl. Owl here is a silence build. Silence is incredibly broken on Zephyr because you nullify the only things that can harm her, which includes Eczema units or toxin clouds from infested units, ancient disruptors hitting you and draining your energy. All of that stuff is completely shut down, so you basically get to rely on Turbulence's incredible bullet deflection and protection from all other melee damage just by being up in the air, so that's great. Also, quickly want to talk and touch upon that, which is Boreal's Anguish. This is a really nice Exilus mod I find, because it helps you aim glide better, and aim gliding lets you activate Zephyr's passive, basically gives you a whole bunch more crit chance, which is very convenient. Next build, Heron. This is the one I use for Deviri Steel Path Circuit. It's just a Spectra Rage, Spectra Siphon. If I get this, I basically know I'm set for defenses, so excavation missions and defenses are super easy, and I've got infinite energy to play with, since Spectra Siphon lets me give a ton of energy to myself and to all allies. Similar kind of same setup, Brief Respite, Boreal's Anguish. You're going to see this in a lot of setups because I think shield getting is great, and this is the only aura that really matters for Zephyr, and I think that this is great for just traversal. Woodpecker is a armor strip build. Fire Blast I find to be the best armor strip for Zephyr since it requires the least strength out of any of the armor strips. It still requires 2 casts, but hey, that's fine because you've got infinite energy, which is something I'll also talk about in just a moment. Otherwise, we also have Funnel Clouds here just to kind of play with more of the crit recursion because that's more consistent with more tornadoes. This is the only time where I really consider Funnel Clouds. Otherwise, it's just kind of an okay mod. Sparrow is an empty slot for right now. I think it was something that I was playing with Jetstream, but I don't really do much with high strength Zephyr, so it's kind of on the wayside right now. And finally, Vulture is my chest breaking Zephyr build. This is just for going into any mission and farming resources, usually Deimos or Zarman, or sometimes even like Ceres capture just to get a bunch of Auric and cells, because why not? You kind of might as well. And it also, at this level, at those levels, it seems like Airburst will just kill any mobs, which is great, because, I mean, being able to nuke the entire map just by spamming this 15 cost, or actually 7 cost energy ability once you're in the air, that deals, 200 damage and has a huge radius is great. So I talked about infinite energy, and that comes from a Worm and Hellstrom. So Zephyr is great with Sentinels because her turbulence will completely protect them, and you basically completely nullify their one weakness, which is that they are prone to dying, and I mean turbulence just says no, they're not going to die, which is great. Additionally, Worm, I believe, is the best Sentinel for Zephyr just because of negate, because Zephyr's only real weakness is status effects, whether that be from XMI units or Toxin Clouds or so on and so forth, which again you can nullify with Silence, but if you don't want to run Silence, this is great, because negate will just turn off anything that happens to you, and you're not going to get hit enough for its cooldown to really matter. So it'll basically always save you from Arson XMI, it'll always save you from accidentally running through a nullification door and not getting your energy drained, because that's really convenient too, and a whole bunch of other status effects that you can just kind of ignore, because it doesn't matter. Otherwise, it's a very simple thing. Once I do level this back up, because I did format it recently, I'm going to put in Accelerated Deflection just so I can get more shields recharged so it shield gates quicker, because that's the only time that this thing is under any danger. Otherwise, the Synth set obviously helps with energy generation. I'll show a really quick clip of how incredible the energy generation is with these two mods. I mean, it combined with Hellstrom, which is an incredible Sentinel weapon you get from Legs in Fortuna, basically allows you to coat the entire map in viral procs way faster than a Panzer Voltbefeile does, and way more consistently than a Panzer Voltbefeile does. It's about 100 energy, enough just to begin this process, and that's all I need, because I can just group these guys together, let the rockets impact them, shoot tornadoes, kill them all, and that's 300 energy. Repeat the process again, and that's another 250 energy. So you can see you very, very quickly rack up an ungodly amount of energy. And this is better than Panzer, I find, because Panzer doesn't move this fast. And because the rockets are homing, they'll chase enemies who are being pulled by your turbulence or by your airburst. This is the Riven I have for it. It's the only Riven I've ever rolled this high, just because it took me this long to get something that I was actually happy with. I highly recommend you get a Hellstrom Riven or some kind of Sentinel weapon Riven if you can. They're hard to come by. You just need to get some at least from the market, but you can just get some Mars rep to get them and kind of play around with them. They're very convenient, and I think Sentinels are super underrated, and especially on Zephyr, because Zephyr completely keeps them alive, which is just amazing. And yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to show you. Zephyr is amazing, and you should play her. I think she's arguably one of the best, if not the best frames in the game. And it's crazy that she's super, super underrated. Barely see any Zephyr players anymore, but yeah, would highly recommend. And now that you know more about her, you should check her out. Try playing with whatever you've got. See if the weapon you use can do the crit recursion well. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.